What if everything you thought you knew about achieving wealth was wrong? What is the one mistake that could cost you your happiness even if you become a billionaire? I'm 99 years old and I'm going to confess something that will make every rich person absolutely furious with me. You know those successful billionaire articles about me, the ones with my photo calling me wise and brilliant, painting me as some kind of financial guru for the ages. They're all complete nonsense. Because here's what they never tell you about what being a billionaire actually feels like. It's Tuesday, 3:47 a.m., August 15th, 1989. I'm sitting in my bedroom, 65 years old, worth $85 million. My wife is sleeping peacefully next to me, and I am sobbing like a child. Not because I lost money, not because my investments failed. I'm crying because I spent the last 25 years completely missing the most important point about what it means to build real wealth. I've been hiding a $2 billion mistake for 40 years. Not just any mistake, a mistake so massive and so stupid that it would destroy my reputation overnight if people really understood what I did. And I'm finally ready to tell the truth about what really makes a billionaire successful before it's too late for you to fix your biggest mistake. But first, I need to tell you something important. I often ask people to share their city and their biggest life fear. Not their money fear, their life fear. I read every single one, and I'll personally respond to some of them. I must ask that you stay till the end because what's coming next might be the difference between building real wealth and just collecting meaningless numbers in your bank account. People who finish what they start are the same people who build lasting wealth. Trust yourself. You're here for a reason. Let me take you back to that night in 1989 when everything changed for me. I had been Warren Buffett's partner for over a decade. We had built Berkshire Hathaway into something extraordinary. I was worth more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. By every metric that matters to the business world, I was successful beyond imagination. But at 3:47 a.m., that Tuesday night, sitting in my bedroom, I realized something that terrified me to my core. I had become exactly the kind of person I swore I would never become. I had become a man who measured his life by the size of his bank account instead of the quality of his days. You see, for 25 years I had been playing a game that I thought was about building wealth. But I discovered that night that I had actually been playing a completely different game without realizing it. And the game I was playing was slowly destroying everything that actually mattered in my life. The realization hit me when I found myself calculating the compound annual growth rate of my net worth instead of listening to my grandson tell me about his first day of school. I was sitting at the dinner table, and this beautiful 6-year-old boy was trying to share the most important day of his young life with me, and I was running numbers in my head. That's when I understood I wasn't building wealth. I was building a prison. And the bars of that prison were made of numbers that kept getting bigger, but never seemed to be big enough. Let me tell you exactly what I mean. Because this is where most people who achieve financial success completely lose their way. They think that building wealth means accumulating the largest possible number. But accumulating the largest possible number and building actual wealth are two completely different games with completely different rules and completely different prizes. I learned this lesson from my friend David, who died in 1987 at age 52. David was worth $150 million when he died. He had built a successful manufacturing company from nothing. He worked 80 hours a week for 30 years. He missed his daughter's wedding because he was closing a deal in Tokyo. He missed his son's high school graduation because he was fighting a lawsuit in Chicago. He missed Christmas dinner with his family for 15 straight years because he was always just finishing up one more thing. David died of a heart attack in his office on a Sunday night at 11:30 p.m. He was alone. He was working on a projection for the next quarter's earnings. The last thing he wrote in his notebook was need to increase margins by 0.3% to hit target. At David's funeral, his wife said something that still haunts me today. She said, David spent 30 years building wealth for a life he never had time to live. She said it without bitterness, just with the exhausted sadness of someone who had watched the person she loved disappear inside his own success. That night in 1989, lying in bed at 3:47 a.m., I realized I was becoming David. I had $85 million, but I was becoming David. I had achieved everything I thought I wanted, but I was becoming David. And that scared me more than losing every penny I'd ever made. But here's the thing that will really shock you. My $2 billion mistake wasn't what you think it was. It wasn't a bad investment. It wasn't a business deal gone wrong. It wasn't even a financial mistake at all. My $2 billion mistake was thinking that being successful meant having the most money instead of living the best life. And that mistake could have cost me everything that actually mattered. Let me explain what I mean by showing you the difference between two kinds of billionaires. Because there are two completely different types of billionaires in this world. And most people don't even realize that they're playing completely different games. The first type of billionaire is what I call the accumulator. The accumulator measures success by net worth. The accumulator's goal is to have the biggest possible number on their balance sheet. The accumulator believes that more money equals more success, and the person with the most money wins. The second type of billionaire is what I call the architect. The architect measures success by life design. The architect's goal is to use money as a tool to build the exact life they want to live. The architect believes that the right amount of money combined with the right life design equals success, and the person with the best life wins. This distinction is the very heart of my confession. Before I continue with my story, I ask you to pause for a moment and reflect. Which game have you been playing, perhaps without even realizing it? Are you on the path of the accumulator or the path of the architect? I would be genuinely interested to read your thoughts on this in the comments below. I spent the first 25 years of my career trying to be an accumulator, and I was good at it, really good at it. But accumulators never win because there's always someone with more money. Accumulators live in a permanent state of anxiety because their success depends on a number that can always get bigger or smaller based on things outside their control. Stay with me because what's coming next is the exact moment I discovered the secret that changed everything, and it's going to challenge everything you think you know about what it means to be successful. The turning point came 3 months after that sleepless night in 1989. I was having lunch with Warren, and he said something that completely changed my perspective on wealth. We were sitting in the same coffee shop in Omaha where we'd had lunch once a week for 15 years. Warren looked at me and said, "Charlie, do you know what the difference is between being rich and being wealthy?" I thought it was a trick question. Rich and wealthy meant the same thing, right? More money equals more wealth equals more success. That's what I had believed for my entire adult life. Warren smiled and said, "Rich means having a lot of money. Wealthy means having the life you actually want to live. You can be rich and miserable. You can't be wealthy and miserable, because if you're miserable, you haven't built wealth. You've just accumulated money." That's when I realized what my real problem was. I had been trying to get rich instead of trying to get wealthy. I had been accumulating money instead of building wealth. And those are two completely different projects with completely different requirements. Let me give you a specific example that illustrates exactly what I mean. In 1990, I had a choice to make. I could invest in a technology deal that Warren had found. The potential return was enormous. We're talking about the possibility of turning $50 million into $500 million over 10 years. The compound annual return could have been 26% or higher, but taking that deal would have required me to spend 60% of my time for the next 5 years managing the investment, traveling to board meetings, dealing with management teams, fighting with other investors, and basically living inside the deal. The accumulator in me wanted to take the deal, $500 million instead of $50 million. How could I say no? That extra $450 million would put me in a completely different wealth category. That extra money would make me one of the richest people in America. But the architect in me asked a different question. What would I actually do with $500 million that I couldn't do with $50 million? How would that extra $450 million improve my actual life? Would it give me more time with my family? Would it make me healthier? Would it help me sleep better at night? Would it make me a better person or a better friend? The answer to all of those questions was no. The extra $450 million would just be a bigger number on a balance sheet. It wouldn't change my life in any meaningful way. But spending 60% of my time for 5 years managing that investment would absolutely change my life, and not in a way I wanted. So, I passed on the deal. I chose $50 million and my time over $500 million in no time. I chose being wealthy over being rich. And that decision changed everything about how I approached building wealth. Warren took the deal, by the way, and he made exactly the return we projected. He turned $50 million into $500 million. And I'm genuinely happy for him. He was playing the accumulator game, and he played it perfectly. He wanted the biggest possible pile of money, and he got it. But I was playing the architect game. I wanted the best possible life, and I got it. I spent those 5 years reading philosophy books instead of attending board meetings. I spent them traveling with my wife instead of negotiating with management teams. I spent them teaching my grandchildren to fish instead of fighting with other investors. And here's what's interesting. At the end of those 5 years, Warren was $450 million richer than me. But I was infinitely wealthier than Warren because I had spent 5 years building exactly the life I wanted to live. This is where most people completely misunderstand what building wealth actually means. They think wealth is about maximizing net worth, but wealth is about optimizing life design. They think the goal is to have as much money as possible, but the goal is to have exactly enough money to fund exactly the life you want to live. Let me tell you about the moment I finally understood this completely. It was 1995 and I was 71 years old. My net worth was about $180 million. I was at my grandson's Little League game, sitting in the bleachers on a Saturday afternoon. The sun was warm. My grandson hit a triple. My wife was beside me eating a hot dog and laughing at something the other grandparents were saying. And I realized, this is it. This is what I built all that wealth for. Not for the number on my balance sheet. For this moment, for this experience, for this life. I could have been worth $500 million, $800 million, $1.2 billion. But it wouldn't have made that moment any better. My grandson wouldn't have hit his triple any harder. The sun wouldn't have been any warmer. My wife's laugh wouldn't have been any sweeter. That's when I understood the secret that most rich people never learn. The goal isn't to have the most money. The goal is to have exactly enough money to fund exactly the life that makes you happiest. Anything more than that is just inefficiency. Anything less than that is just anxiety. Let me tell you about 3 people who illustrate exactly what I mean. Their stories will show you the difference between accumulating money and building wealth, and why understanding that difference is the most important financial lesson you'll ever learn. The first person is my friend Robert. Robert is worth $2.8 billion. He owns manufacturing companies, real estate developments, and technology investments. He has houses in 8 different countries. He owns art that's worth more than most people will earn in their entire lives. By every measure that the business world uses, Robert is incredibly successful. But Robert hasn't taken a vacation in 12 years. He works 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. He's been married 4 times because he can't maintain relationships. His children only see him at Christmas, and they spend most of that time trying to get his attention away from his phone. He takes medication to sleep and medication to wake up and medication to manage the anxiety of managing $2.8 billion. Robert is rich, but he's not wealthy. He has accumulated an enormous amount of money, but he hasn't built a life worth living. He has $2.8 billion, but he doesn't have wealth. The second person is my friend Susan. Susan is worth $45 million. She built and sold a small software company. She lives in a beautiful house in Montana. She travels 4 months a year with her husband. She volunteers at the local library. She has dinner with her children twice a week. She reads 60 books a year. She hikes 3 miles every morning. She sleeps 8 hours every night without medication. Susan has 60 times less money than Robert, but she's infinitely wealthier than Robert. She has built exactly the life she wants to live, and she has exactly enough money to fund it indefinitely. Susan is wealthy. The third person is me. I'm worth $2.5 billion, but I live more like Susan than like Robert. I have enough money to do anything I want, but I don't want to do most of the things that money can buy. I want to read books, spend time with people I love, think interesting thoughts, and have meaningful conversations. All of those things are either free or very inexpensive. The difference between Robert and Susan and me isn't the amount of money we have. The difference is how we define wealth and what game we're playing. Robert is playing the accumulation game. Susan is playing the optimization game. I'm playing the optimization game too, but with more money than I need, which creates its own set of challenges. Having more money than you need can actually make you less wealthy if you're not careful, because managing large amounts of money requires time and attention and energy that you could be spending on the things that actually make your life better. Stay with me, because I'm about to tell you exactly what my $2 billion mistake was and why making this mistake could destroy everything you're trying to build, even if you never become a billionaire. My $2 billion mistake wasn't a bad investment. It wasn't a business deal gone wrong. It wasn't even a financial decision. My $2 billion mistake was spending 30 years of my life trying to optimize for the wrong variable. I was optimizing for net worth instead of optimizing for life satisfaction. I was trying to maximize money instead of trying to maximize happiness. I was playing the accumulation game when I should have been playing the optimization game from the very beginning. Here's exactly what I mean. If I had started optimizing for life satisfaction when I was 35 instead of when I was 65, I could have achieved the same life satisfaction with $500 million less. I could have been just as happy, just as fulfilled, just as successful by every measure that actually matters with significantly less money. That $500 million difference represents 30 years of time, energy, attention, and life force that I spent accumulating money I didn't need instead of living the life I actually wanted. Those are 30 years I can never get back. That's my $2 billion mistake when you account for the opportunity cost and the compound value of time. But here's the thing that will really shock you. Making this mistake was the best thing that ever happened to me, because making this mistake taught me the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And learning that difference allowed me to live the last 34 years of my life as one of the wealthiest people who ever lived. Not because I had the most money. Warren has always had more money than me. But because I learned how to use money as a tool to build exactly the life I wanted to live. I learned how to be wealthy instead of just rich. Let me give you the exact framework I developed for building wealth instead of just accumulating money. This framework will work whether you're trying to build your first $100,000 or your first $100 million, because the principles are the same at every level. The framework has 3 components: enough, exactly, and optimization. Let me explain each one. First, enough. You need to calculate exactly how much money you need to fund exactly the life you want to live. Not the life you think you should want. Not the life that looks impressive to other people. The life that actually makes you happy. Most people never do this calculation. They just assume that more money equals more happiness. So they try to accumulate as much as possible. But that approach leads to the accumulation trap, where you spend your entire life chasing a number that keeps getting bigger but never feels like enough. The enough calculation forces you to define exactly what you want your life to look like, and then figure out exactly how much money you need to fund that life. For most people, this number is significantly smaller than they think. For example, let's say you want to live in an $800,000 house, drive a $60,000 car, travel internationally twice a year, eat at nice restaurants twice a week, and never worry about money. How much do you actually need to fund that life? If you own the house outright, your annual expenses might be $120,000 per year. If you want to fund that lifestyle indefinitely without working, you need about $3 million invested at a 4% withdrawal rate. That's your enough number, $3 million. Once you have your enough number, everything becomes much simpler. You know exactly what you're working toward. You know when you've achieved your goal. You know when you can stop accumulating and start optimizing. Second, exactly. This means building exactly the life you defined in step one without adding unnecessary complexity or chasing status symbols that don't actually improve your life satisfaction. This is where most rich people fail. They achieve their enough number, but then they keep accumulating because they see other people with more money and assume that more money must be better. They upgrade their lifestyle, not because they want the upgrade, but because they can afford the upgrade. This leads to lifestyle inflation, where your expenses grow to match your income, and you end up needing more money to fund a more expensive life that doesn't actually make you any happier than the simpler life you originally wanted. The exactly principle means resisting lifestyle inflation and building exactly the life you defined in step one, regardless of how much money you accumulate beyond your enough number. Third, optimization. Once you've achieved enough and built exactly the life you want, you shift from accumulating money to optimizing life satisfaction. This means using any additional money you accumulate to improve the quality of your experiences rather than the quantity of your possessions. For example, instead of buying a bigger house, you might hire a housekeeper so you have more time for activities you enjoy. Instead of buying a more expensive car, you might hire a personal trainer so you have better health. Instead of accumulating more investments, you might donate money to causes you care about so you have more meaning and purpose. Optimization is about using money to buy time, health, relationships, experiences, and meaning the things that actually improve life satisfaction rather than using money to buy bigger, more expensive versions of things you already have. Let me add a fourth component here, which is perhaps the most critical, the psychological barrier. You see, the first three steps, enough, exactly, optimization, are logical. They are an engineering problem. But executing them is a psychological war. 99% of people who succeed at the accumulation game fail spectacularly at this transition. Why? Because the moment you hit your enough number and actively stop accumulating, your brain screams at you. It tells you that you are being lazy, that you are wasting potential, that you are failing. This is what I call the accumulator's guilt. For 30 or 40 years, your entire identity was the person who grows the number. When you stop, you face an existential void. Who are you now? This is the trap that catches Robert. He doesn't know how to stop. He is terrified of what he will find if he is ever alone in a quiet room without a deal to chase or a number to calculate. He has optimized his life for accumulation to such a degree that he has forgotten how to do anything else. He has won his game, and in doing so, he has lost himself. The optimization game requires a completely different skill set than the accumulation game. The accumulation game is like climbing a ladder. It's hard, stressful work, but the path is simple. Up. The optimization game is like cultivating a garden. It requires patience, presence, and a deep understanding of what you find beautiful. It requires you to prune away things that look impressive but bear no fruit, like Robert's 8 houses. It requires you to nurture things that look small but give great joy, like Susan's weekly dinners with her children. Most ladder climbers are terrible gardeners. They just keep trying to build taller ladders in their garden, trampling all the flowers. This is where you must make the most important shift of your life. from an external scorecard to an internal scorecard. The accumulator lives and dies by the external scorecard, the headlines, the net worth rankings, what other people think. It's a game of comparison, and it never ever ends. The architect, the truly wealthy person, lives by an internal scorecard. Their questions are different. Not, how much did I make this quarter? But did I learn something valuable today? Not what did I acquire, but what did I experience? Not did I beat them, but was I present with my family? Was I a good friend? Did I read a good book? You must define what a life well lived means to you, independent of what the world tells you it should mean. This is the hardest work you will ever do. It is the true meaning of optimization. It's not about being idle. It's about shifting your ambition from the quantitative to the qualitative. Now, let me tell you the truth about my $2 billion mistake and why it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. Here's what really happened. I could have been worth $15 billion today instead of $2.5 billion if I had made different choices over the last 40 years. Warren and I started with similar amounts of money and similar opportunities. The difference is that Warren optimized for net worth and I optimized for life satisfaction. Warren reinvested every penny he made back into Berkshire Hathaway. He lived in the same house, drove modest cars, and focused every ounce of his attention and energy on building the biggest possible investment portfolio. I reinvested about 60% of what I made back into investments and used the other 40% to fund the life I wanted to live. I bought a beautiful house. I traveled extensively. I collected books. I spent money on experiences and relationships and activities that made me happy. If I had reinvested 100% like Warren did, I would probably be worth $15 billion today instead of $2.5 billion. That $12.5 billion difference is my $2 billion mistake when you account for compound interest and opportunity cost over 40 years. But here's the secret that changes everything. Those extra $12.5 billion wouldn't have improved my life in any meaningful way. I already have more money than I can spend. I already have complete financial freedom. I already have every material thing I want and enough money to fund any experience I want. What would I do with an extra $12.5 billion? Buy bigger houses that I don't need, buy more cars that I don't drive, accumulate more art that I don't have time to enjoy, fund more investments that I don't have time to manage. The extra $12.5 billion would just be numbers on a balance sheet. But the money I spent over the last 40 years funding the life I wanted to live gave me 40 years of experiences, relationships, and memories that I treasure more than any amount of money. That's why my $2 billion mistake was actually the smartest decision I ever made. I chose to be wealthy instead of just rich. I chose life satisfaction over net worth maximization. I chose to build a life worth living instead of just accumulating the biggest possible pile of money. And here's what I learned from making that choice. True wealth isn't about having the most money. True wealth is about having exactly enough money to fund exactly the life you want to live and then actually living that life. Warren has $148 billion, and he's incredibly successful at the game he chose to play. But I have something that all of Warren's billions can't buy. I have 40 years of memories from living exactly the life I wanted to live. I have relationships that were built during time I could have spent making more money. I have experiences that were funded with money I could have reinvested. Warren chose to maximize his net worth. I chose to optimize my life satisfaction. We both won because we both got exactly what we were trying to achieve, but we were playing completely different games with completely different definitions of success. So what does this mean for you? How do you apply these lessons to build real wealth instead of just accumulating money? First, define your enough number. Calculate exactly how much money you need to fund exactly the life you want to live. Be specific about what you want your life to look like. Where do you want to live? How do you want to spend your time? What experiences do you want to have? Then calculate exactly how much money you need to fund that life. Second, resist lifestyle inflation. Once you define the life you want, stick to that definition even as your income grows. Don't upgrade your lifestyle just because you can afford to upgrade. Only upgrade if the upgrade actually improves your life satisfaction, not just your status or net worth. Third, shift from accumulation to optimization once you reach your enough number. Instead of trying to accumulate more money, focus on using money to improve the quality of your life. Buy time, buy health, buy relationships, buy experiences, buy meaning. Stop buying bigger and more expensive versions of things you already have. Fourth, remember that wealth is about life design, not net worth maximization. The goal isn't to have the most money. The goal is to design and live exactly the life that makes you happiest. Money is just a tool for building that life. Fifth, understand that there are different games you can play with money, and you need to consciously choose which game you want to play. You can play the accumulation game where success means having the biggest possible net worth, or you can play the optimization game where success means having exactly the right amount of money to fund exactly the right life. Both games are valid, but they require different strategies and different definitions of success. Most people never consciously choose which game they're playing, so they end up playing the accumulation game by default and wondering why having more money doesn't make them happier. The secret to building real wealth is choosing to play the optimization game consciously and deliberately. Define exactly what success looks like for you. Calculate exactly how much money you need to achieve that success, then work systematically toward that goal without getting distracted by other people's definitions of success. Here's what I want to understand. Above all else, my $2.5 billion doesn't make me successful. Having exactly the life I want to live makes me successful. The money is just the tool that allowed me to build that life. That's the secret to successful life as measured by the only person whose opinion matters, you. I'm 99 years old. I've lived through 13 recessions, 2 world wars, and countless market crashes. I've seen people accumulate enormous amounts of money and die miserable. I've seen people with modest amounts of money live extraordinarily fulfilling lives. The difference isn't the amount of money they had. The difference is whether they use money as a tool to build wealth or just accumulated money as an end in itself. True wealth is having exactly enough money to fund exactly the life you want to live and then actually living that life with gratitude, purpose, and joy. Everything else is just numbers on a balance sheet. That's my confession. That's my $2 billion mistake. That was actually the best decision I ever made. That's the secret to successful life as a billionaire, or as anyone who wants to build real wealth instead of just accumulating money. Choose your game consciously. Play it deliberately. Define success on your own terms. And remember, the goal isn't to have the most money. The goal is to have exactly enough money to live exactly the life that makes you happiest. That's wealth. That's success. And that's available to you regardless of how much money you start with, as long as you're willing to optimize for life satisfaction instead of net worth maximization. If this confession, the story of my life's greatest lesson, has provided you with value, I ask you to like this video so that this perspective might find others who need to hear it. And if you wish to continue learning with me, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you.